Welcome to the Doo-Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. I'm your host, Suzan Chin-Taylor, CEO and founder of Creative Raven, the firm that helps wastewater industry contractors and manufacturers unlock the power of digital marketing, AI, and PR to boost sales and opportunities. Whether it's through our online marketing and lead generation programs or providing a fully outsourced marketing department, we are passionate about helping businesses in the wastewater and civil infrastructure sectors not just survive, but thrive in today's digital world. Each episode, I'll be bringing you expert tips and strategies to help you grow and succeed. Let's dive in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Doo-Doo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we are rounding up the third in our three-part series about resiliency. And I want to welcome Jim Dodenhoff of Silent Running back to the show. Welcome, Jim.
Glad to be back. It's been fun to work through this, Susan.
Yes. So now for our final episode, we're going to talk about resiliency and how you can actually make it a reality. If after listening to the first two episodes, you realize, wow, I really got to do this. And so just to put things in context, one of the things that, Jim and I have been discussing offline is that most plants don't fail because they made bad decisions. They failed or have had a problem because they just basically had no time to step back and really look at what they needed to do. And so the first thing we have to remember when we're looking at resiliency of any kind is that the first step is not, oh, let's go out and build something or construct something. It's clarity, okay? And so a feasibility analysis about resiliency and how you should approach or adopt and implement resiliency really needs to start with analysis rather than you just going ahead and jumping into a solution that you think might be the solution. And so with that, Jim, I want you to really address the importance about this, and that the analysis really is not that, it's not a difficult thing because a lot of the data that is needed for this, you already have. You already have it and you don't realize it. And it's incredibly valuable in coming up with a feasibility plan. And how important, I want you to address this also for the audience about modeling scenarios versus guesswork before you decide to embark or before you even embark on what are you going to do about your feasibility. And so with that, the floor is yours, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you. So one thing I want to kind of take it a little bit informal just for a second, but I think this is part of a really good exercise, which is meet with your team and ask yourself, when was the last time we were down for more than an hour and what happened? And maybe summarize that in 1 or 2 pages. That's the kind of question I always ask my clients because everybody's trying to figure out what's the cost of resiliency. But in reality, it's really looking closely at what did it cost us the last time when things were down. Maybe you haven't had an outage in 20 years. So maybe this is, at least historically, a problem for you. I doubt that, but I think by going through the pain and suffering that you experience, that's a good way to sort of revisit whether this is a problem or an issue. The second thing, and that I think is absolutely critical, I alluded to it in one of our previous shows, is really benchmark what your electricity usage is and what your gas usage is. Again, you don't need a consultant like me to do that. You may have somebody on your team who's already responsible for monitoring your energy costs. Many of my clients have somebody like that. But if you don't, it's relatively straightforward to get that data. I wouldn't say go through your bills, but having a good understanding of where your meters are and what the costs are associated with the meters on an annual basis, and downloading that data, most places have 15-minute interval data, is really key. It's key to understanding how vulnerable you might be around resiliency issues, but it's also a good exercise if you haven't done it recent to really be looking closely at your electricity costs and getting a visual representation of where, what time of day, what time of year are your electricity costs really hitting you? If it doesn't correspond to the flow of your operation, then there's probably some learning there. Those two steps are generally doable right on site. After that, I would suggest that a good investment is a feasibility study, as you were alluding to. And what a feasibility study would enable you to do is essentially model visually as well. I'm looking here at a model of a layout. There are models available. People in my business and other people who may do engineering work for you already have access to this, where you can really plug and play different resources in to essentially create a model, a representation of your plant, and really look at all the things that you probably have to look at in terms of justifying the plant, like return on investment, what's going to happen to my electricity cost, what's the capital cost if I'm going to have it. You know, if I'm having a 6-hour outage every 3 months, I'm going to need to design around that. So it enables you to do that. So there are some really, really good tools in the marketplace for that, some of which are open access, available through the government, some of which good consultants can do that. And the final thing I'll say, and then I'll stop, is just that most plants I've been to have some sort of owner's engineering type of representative. Working with somebody who knows your plant is really, really key. And that person should know what they know about your plant and reach out to others as well. I'm not suggesting that you reinvent the wheel by any stretch, but you don't want to start writing purchase orders before you really get a feeling for what the lay of the land looks like.
Well, wow, you just kind of you laid that up perfectly for me for the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, is that understanding what are your critical loads based on, your usage. And, I liken to think that wastewater treatment plants, water treatment plants, they're like a hospital. They cannot go down. And then what you were saying is like, what has to, when you're doing that analysis, what absolutely has to stay online at full capacity, what could stay at capacity maybe partially to keep you in compliance as close as you can during an event, and then maybe what you don't need to worry about. So, I think that, what you alluded to is, and I want you to, talk about this, about why understanding, your critical load changes everything.
So, wastewater treatment plants are kind of like people. Everyone's a little bit different and they have their own personalities. And some of them are absolutely packed into the smallest of space, and others have plenty of space. So it depends is what the critical load is of a plant. But certainly, again, certainly pumping is key. And there's different also levels of pumping. It's just, are you pumping water to bring it in? I've worked
I
with
would
one
also
plant.
think a lot that's going to come into play is the type of plant. Is it SBR? Is it activated sludge? Is it, depending on what is the style,
Absolutely. And I think again, yeah, depending upon but oftentimes a lot of it has to do with space. A lot of it has to do with how you're discharging. In some plants, for a lot of reasons, maybe the draw on wastewater is a really long way. So maybe their pumping load is a lot bigger. The other thing I'd say is your hospital metaphor was wonderful. You can triage. So I'm also not saying that, oh, all pumping is critical load. Maybe certain pumping is not critical loads, and certain uh, certain pumping is a critical load that you're dealing with. You really want to get back to the wastewater treatment plant and the mindset of the facility engineers who really know what's critical to their plant and what they can't um, they can't ignore. Uh, the whole area of, I might argue, well, solids removal or solids handling may not be such a big deal, but certain plants it may be a big deal because the last complaint they got was related to the solids that weren't moved in a timely basis. So I think there's a political aspect of this too. It's, as
Mm,
you've pointed out before, it's not just an engineering issue. It's a what's critical to making this plant operationally efficient and environmentally compliant.
there you go.
And that may not even be something that's a high electricity driver. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to disaggregate that which is operationally critical from that which is, a high electricity use. So,
Okay. Well, you alluded to this in the last episode, and it is because we're all suffering with rising costs for everything. And electrical, I knew California was high, and I knew it was probably getting higher. And, as a former resident of Palm Springs, where it's
oof.
right out there on the 10, where you've got the windmill farm. And what used to really burn our butts as residents of that area of the Coachella Valley is that here we were with this windmill farm. We were generating so much power for SoCal Edison. I think it was SoCal Edison. But yet we got to derive no benefit of that in our community. All that electricity that we were generating in that area got shipped elsewhere on the grid. And everywhere in California, that particular part of California had the highest rates in the entire state. And we used to stomp our feet and go, well, wait a minute, that's not fair. I mean, we should have a benefit of what we're helping to produce for the rest of the state. And so, I'm whining now. I live in northern Arizona. But when you talk about, electricity, price escalation, where now what we're seeing is affordability is now becoming a leading driver for decision makers. Like, how can I bring these costs down? And so, because you've done a lot of these feasibility studies and analysis, what have you been seeing that you could share that you see that plants are doing? Maybe not wastewater, but just anybody that's a high energy consumer, what they're doing quietly to adapt and adopt to help offset these rising costs. What are you seeing as the trends right now?
Well, first of all, I concur with everything you said about the electricity markets. And just to put even a little bit more flavor on it, here in California, there's no question in my mind as a person who's been here for 20 years, energy affordability is now the top issue. And there's a lot of other ones. Renewable energy is important, decarbonization is important, but this issue trumps every other issue there is. And so
Mm,
everybody's looking at it and basically saying, how is it that our electricity costs are twice as much here as the rest of the country? And so every business is looking closely at this. And interestingly, I love your Palm Springs example. I think the answer lies in, not to get energy wonky, but distributed generation. I think the answer lies in having as much control of your own destiny as possible. And what that looks like are things like microgrids on site. There's a raging debate in this world about data centers. There's a ton of data centers going in Arizona right now. How should data centers be powered? I would offer data centers the same advice I'm offering wastewater treatment plants. Start with siting energy resources right where you're at, because you'll have the most amount of control over that. Plus, you are producing things that may be able to be used in that microgrid, methane gas, heat, other things that really, and you're in an industrial environment to begin with. I think what businesses all over the place are coming to the conclusion of, hey, I know a battery costs X, but you know what? I can't afford to have my restaurant be down by for 9 hours a day. I'm gonna invest in that. So different kinds of interpretations of technology for backup power. It's not just a diesel generator. Maybe it's battery, something that's um, almost more reliable. So I think we're seeing this sort of distribution of generation and people taking the look of how can I control my destiny.
Mm,
Um, the other insight I would say about economics is what facility managers don't like is they don't like something that could cost them 50% more in 5 years.
mm,
They may even be able to live with a fixed cost of, I don't know, I don't even know what the example is, labor, of going up 5% per year. What's happened with in the energy market is the costs have gone up dramatically, and people have kind of said that I can't I can't do that anymore. I can't budget that way, and so I do think there's a real opportunity to stabilize costs.
you were talking about data centers. There's been this concept, and I've talked to a number of people about this. In fact, even on the podcast, about how data centers and wastewater treatment plants, the data centers should try to build close to a wastewater treatment plant, because using other types of alternative or funneling that energy, that they can actually help each other. They can actually help each other because data centers are going to require tremendous amount of water in order to stay cool. And then there's also, looking at alternative energies like geothermal energy, which is coming onto the scene, and it hasn't been explored enough. And it's just, there are so many things that it can do, from things that already exist naturally in the wastewater stream that we're just now starting to, touch the tip of the iceberg on what that could do as far as energy generation. And what you were saying, controlling your own destiny and making your own self, being self-sufficient, which brings me to, we had talked offline that you've worked with a number of progressive agencies, and maybe you can't really speak to them, but what have you seen, or if you can cite some examples of agencies that have done this and done this successfully, and how did they do it?
Well, I certainly would mention, and I haven't done a ton of work for them, but I've visited their plant on multiple occasions, and they continue to be very active. Orange County Sanitation District.
They're very progressive, yes.
They I think they have the capital expenditure cycle. I know they're on top of their energy needs. It's a very interesting technical challenge they have there too, because they're co-located with a drinking water facility, and they have yeah. That would certainly be an example. Another one, Victor Valley Wastewater Treatment Plant. Just a very progressive facility. I I wish I'd like to spend more time in the space. My experience has been that the people who run these facilities, if they really want to, dive in, are almost evangelical in terms of
Mm,
their drive towards innovation. And, it's not easy. It's not easy to do that at all. But the leadership style I've seen amongst the plants that I've worked with uh, is this sort of, I'll call it prudent risk taking, and an ability to um, push hard, find funding from a bunch of different places. And quite honestly, I don't know that those folks necessarily always get a lot of pats on the back. I'll mention one other thing. I mean, I think I've shared this with you, but I think one of the great wastewater technology stories of the last 50 years is the fact that the city of Phoenix ships its wastewater effluent, treated effluent, to Palos Verdes nuclear plant, where it's used to essentially provide makeup water for those nuclear plants. I'm a nuclear proponent. Yep, I am. And what a brilliant story. And guess what? That story was bubbling up 40 years ago, no pun intended. and it's worked pretty darn well. So this is an industry that I think doesn't probably get enough credit for its technological innovation. But I think that it's difficult, it's challenging, but those are the characteristics of leadership and teams at these plants that I've seen that seem to differentiate those that are really all in versus those that maybe aren't or can't afford to, just for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think the heart and the passion is there to do it, but like you made a great point is that they want to, but they may not have the means to do it. And so I just want to wrap this up with, I think, what you've really made clear with this series is that there's an opportunity, you need to explore it, but don't just like go off and get started without knowing the best route to take. Even you cited that example. If you have an outage maybe once every 20 years, maybe you don't really seriously, well, you need to think about something, but it may not be as, critical right now that, oh, I've got to do something now, than that plant that's maybe experiencing something once every 3 months that I need to take a serious look at this. So, analysis and feasibility and just knowing and working with your data, understanding what your needs are. That's the whole thing, is that do your homework because you don't want to under design. And then you also don't want to over design at the same time.
Yeah. If you haven't looked at your electricity interval data for the past 12 months, if you haven't done that in 2 or 3 years, that is such a winner of a look. It may tell you some things about whether a microgrid is a good idea or not, but I almost guarantee you that it will absolutely tell you some things about how you're using electricity and how you might be able to save some money by using it a little bit differently.
All right. Well, if you have been a utility manager, owner, whatnot, listening to this, and you're thinking to yourself, oh, we need to start exploring this, so I think I need to have a smart conversation, I would encourage you, reach out to Jim. This is one of the foremost experts in this space. He's a straight shooter. He'll tell you what you need to do, maybe even some things that you can start doing yourself to DIY, to take the first steps. And so, Jim, if they're looking to explore, what's the best way to get in touch with you and maybe start the conversation?
Sure. www.silentrunning.biz is my website. All the information. I have a particular kind of vertical around wastewater treatment that you might be interested in, but again, particularly just how do I get my interval data anyway? Happy to talk to you about it. I've done it for a lot of clients. Some cases just told them how to do it, but I just think it's so important to understand what you're doing. So that's a great way to do it. And yeah, anything I can do to help, I'd be glad to.
Well, again, thank you, Jim, wow, you've been so generous with your time and your expertise on the show, and I really appreciate it. Because as you said, for me, the reason I do this show is to give back to an industry that's been so very, very good to me over the decades. And, the people that work in this industry are unsung heroes. They do really tough jobs every day that enable us to have the lifestyle that many don't have in this country. And so, they're my heroes, and work with people like yourself that are helping agencies like this to do this. Thank you so much for your service. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Hope you got something out of this series. I know I did, a deeper understanding of the importance of resilience. And so thank you again. And until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. If you're ready to take your marketing to the next level and start increasing sales and opportunities for your business, reach out to us at Creative Raven. We're here to help you thrive in the digital landscape. Visit creativeraven.com or click the link in the show notes below to schedule a call and learn how we can support your growth. If you enjoyed the insights on today's episode, be sure to hit subscribe so you'll never miss an update. Until next time, keep growing and keep it flowing.